Hello, everyone. I am so excited for today's live. I have a really awesome guest joining. There she is. Hi. All right, let's see. I haven't done a live with everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to be jumping on. Hi.
Hi,
Hello, beautiful. It's so good to see you.
how's it going? Good to see you too. Nice to meet you kind of virtually in
I
person, I
know.
guess. But
I
what a
know,
beautiful day it
right? So
is.
just so everyone knows, we actually have never physically met before. So this is really cool. And actually, before we dive
Mhm.
in, I want to tell you a little backstory of like how you actually came into my life, and you don't even know it. um, cool how the internet works, right? So it was about a year and a half ago. One of my best friends was she opened up to me about how she was really struggling with like the grief and all of the really heavy emotions she was having around her abortion. And she told me she found you. And she actually lives in San
Mm.
Diego. We're all from San Diego, even though I live in Utah right now. Don't get me going. Um, and she actually did some work with you. She did, I think, once like a first like an intro session with you. And I'll never forget that call. She came home and called me and told me just like
Mm.
I could feel her lightness and her electricity after her session with
Mm.
you. And she was sobbing because of the relief and how great she felt. And I was so taken back because I was obviously like this is like a huge thing that women need. This is a what you're providing is a huge service. And I was so relieved for her. And then I was like, who is this? I got to check her out. And then she went on to tell
Mm.
me that she was going to do like a yoni steam, I believe. And I was like, what is that?
Mhm.
So all these just really neat things that came into my life through you. And then as I've been a coach, I've met a lot of women who have come onto my discovery calls and they just sobbed the whole time because they haven't processed an abortion, a rape, or losing a child, like a stillbirth. And I see how, as a health and wellness coach,
Mm.
I see how this one aspect of life is really affecting overall health.
Mm.
And so I just love what you do, and I'm grateful you
Mm.
exist and the messages that you put out. It's so
Mm.
needed. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, Thank you for reaching out. And I feel like you're bringing in a really important element of the conversation that maybe doesn't always get a lot of shine, which I feel like it really should, is release, right? Pregnancy release, loss, miscarriage, abortion, and honestly, what it feels like to die a little bit when there's people that leave your life or when things around you die that you thought were going to be permanent. And so, honoring the temporality of life, honoring grief is so vital and important. And I think a element of the either entheogen conversation or the womb wellness conversation that I feel people kind of like tiptoe around, but I feel holds so many keys to unlocking, not just the truth of who we are, but like the vastness of the human experience. So, yeah, thank you for centering this conversation. I feel like it's also really important. And I absolutely love sitting for people who've been through this specific portal and supporting them with not just the hands on womb care, like you're talking about the yoni steam, which I'd love to talk to you more about, but, also with the support of entheogens and mushrooms and cannabis and all of these other incredible plant allies that I feel can be very supportive to a person facing, death and transformation. So that's the intersection really of like mushroom consciousness for sure.
Yeah, I
So thank
love
you for
how you
pointing to
call
that.
them plant allies. I've actually never heard that before. That's such a so true. I know.
Welcome to that
That's so
terminology.
true. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So
Mm.
let's dive into you. I'm so curious about you and how you got on this journey. So do you want to just like share a little bit about your story or do you want to just dive into some questions?
I do storytelling
Oh, okay.
within answering the question. So I just feel like let's save the bio and just like dive right into what people and what you want to know. And then, yeah, I'll weave in like my
Okay,
truths and my
cool.
history into
Love
all
it.
of those things.
So how
Mhm.
did you become a mushroom mother?
So I came into a relationship with psilocybin mushrooms when I was about 19 years old. So this was 9 years ago. And I found home in the mushroom. And a lot of people have reported back, or, I've sat for people that maybe it's like their first time and they'll say, I feel like I'm home. Like, I feel like this is how I should always feel. And the truth of it is I honestly feel like so many of us that are finding the mushroom now have been eating the mushroom through so many different iterations of our experience in our life here on earth that whether that's an ancestor who's eaten mushrooms or maybe us in another incarnation or just have a cultural like relationship with the mushroom that it calls us home. And so I felt so at home with the medicine that I just continued to have personal relationship with it. And when I talk about plant allies, fungus allies, medicine allies. When we say ally, it means like friend, someone who we sit with. And this is less a conversation of consumption as much as it is a conversation about relationship and like how we relate to other sentient beings on earth. So I felt like this medicine was down to like be my friend. And so we spent a lot of time in the mushroom space and that happened for years. I started sitting in circle ceremonies. I started sitting with my dear friends, and I just found that I felt really also at home with like sitting with mushrooms in ceremony as opposed to recreational. That became very apparent very quickly. Is like, this is not a medicine to just be fucking around with and like playing with. And, it was really impacting me to be eating mushrooms in the wrong setting. And so when I found the right setting, I really committed myself to maintaining that. And in that time, I'd been in a loving relationship with someone. We've been together for, 8 years. And so kind of found him right after I found the mushroom. And so we became pregnant, we conceived a child. And I had a big question. I was like, do I stop my relationship with the mushroom? Like, is there like a pausing time, for pregnancy and birth and postpartum and breastfeeding? So I did some research like any mother would. I'm like, so is this appropriate? And to who is it appropriate? And I really wanted to ask that question, like, to who is it appropriate to eat mushrooms? Because if we're talking the scientific community, right, they have their own like unique bias about like what safe is. And when I looked at underground online forums, I actually was met with like the same level of resistance, which really surprised me. I was like, even for people that are on like the cutting edge of psychedelics and people that are like super on the edges and fringes of society, they still have a lot of judgments around pregnant people eating mushrooms. Like, where is a pregnant mother to go when they feel like these mushrooms are intrinsic to their mental health? And so I was I have the privilege of just having access to some traditional medicine people. And so, through my network, I reached out through a friend. I don't speak very fluent Spanish, so I asked my friend to translate, and I asked the abuela, the teacher, is it appropriate for me to continue my relationship with mushrooms while I'm pregnant? And she gave me like a really rich body of knowledge around, the that this is a bias that's only really centered in the West. That this bias and that this feeling that we have that the earth is dangerous in any capacity is uniquely Western and reductionist. So she shared with me that, mothers, she ate mushrooms while she was pregnant. The mothers eat mushrooms while they're breastfeeding. That when the children are even as young as 3 years old, they're starting to eat the mushroom. So, she kind of like welcomed me in and permissioned me to continue my relationship. And she was the first person to give me mushrooms while I was pregnant and serve me. And so that has become pretty much the foundation for my advocacy is that if we are looking to Google, mothers are not going to find resources around eating mushrooms in a good way, but there is a rich cultural knowledge and honestly some science to show that this is rather safe and a wonderful decision when faced with the need. So that's how I became a mushroom mom. And I'm really grateful that I did, because it absolutely like shifted what was possible for my life, and now is the message that I
I
choose
love that.
to share with
And you
people.
know, it's anything that's good for us, you're not going to find on a search on the internet. Like, let's just be real. Like they,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard to discern. There's just so much information available, and it's unfortunate that the overwhelming like response from the big information space is that like mushrooms are not safe for pregnancy and breastfeeding and postpartum, and should be completely avoided at all costs. And we just see through anecdotal information, cultural knowledge of 6,000 years, it's just not true. And it's unfortunate because the average person is just going to use the Google search, and then it will pull them away. And that's really sad, because this medicine stands to benefit and be an ally for so many people whose only alternative is kind of SSRIs and antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety medication, which we know and has been proven to cause harm to babies in utero. So yeah, alternatives are needed. And it's funny because Western medicine is the alternative. Traditional medicine is the long-standing, what has been part of the human family for,
yeah,
yeah, since the dawn of
exactly.
time.
Yeah, it. I actually have personally never experienced mushrooms, and when I found out you're in San Diego and I'm going to be moving back, I was like, oh, I'll have to go play and see how that is. So when you're like, mushrooms are home, I'm like, wow, that must be amazing feeling. And yeah, I'm like,
It is.
I gotta, I
Yeah.
gotta come hook up. I'm looking forward to that. Um, Thank you for sharing all of that. So much valuable information. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love
You're
that you're
welcome.
connected to
Hmm.
what did you call her name? It was beautiful. Well,
Um, so she goes by abuela, or the abuela, or abuela chicosochi. Abuela
oh,
just means grandmother in Spanish. And she's just an elder, not just an elder, but is an elder that has like led, quite a few ceremonies that I've sat in. And I have friends that have studied under her, and she lives in Mexico, and is part of like a way wider network of people with this similar cosmology. However, she was kind of my access point into the cosmology of Mexico. And I'm a Mexican person. I'm a detribalized indigenous Mexican person. And so I feel like that was really important for me to have access to a space that was
yeah.
culturally
Yeah, it
relevant for
is.
me.
It is important. And I feel like right now, um, because I talk to so
Thanks,
many,
sis.
you
It
good?
looks great.
Oh
I was
my
just
God.
delivered delicious food by my loving housemate, who also
Nice.
studied under the same
Well,
teacher.
cheers to delicious food. Yeah, I just really feel,
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but the women I speak to all the time about their thyroid issues, there absolutely is a collective conscious, like moving away from Western medicine right now. Like with everything that we've been through the past few years, people are like, hang on, like I am not okay with this. And they're definitely seeking for the
Hmm.
traditional, like you said, the stuff that's been around with us from the beginning. I
Yeah.
know, that on my wellness journey, that was definitely the path that I was looking for as well, because I was sick for 10 years and I got nothing but gaslighted. My doctor became my narcissist abuser. And, so I appreciate that you point out all of the other healers that you can turn to that are one with the cosmos, like you said. All right, so my next question is womb healing. How did you get into womb healing in particular?
Hmm. So I was born with a womb. I come from womb, right? My mom has one. We all come from womb. Um, at least now. Things might change in the future, but many of us come from womb. And so I started developing a relationship with my womb right before I started my bleeding time. And I always had like a really keen interest in what was going on with my physical body, and had a lot of curiosity for my vagina and my labia and like all these other parts of me that like not a lot of people were talking about. I yeah, I went to Christian school, I went to Catholic school. So there's really little conversation around proper sexual education, education of anatomy, and but I always found myself in our like biology books flipping over to like the vagina and the penis is obviously the most interesting parts of the fucking science book. But you know, I was like always really fascinated about the entire female reproductive system and like how it functions and its cadence and just learning that it even is like rhythmic and has cycle. And that was always really interesting to me. And I started experimenting with like tampons even before I started bleeding. Like I just was like, there's something here. Like there's something interesting going on here. And my curiosity has always guided me to the things that I now do. And honestly, I'm still a very curious person. So I found myself on hormonal birth control at age 11. And I thought that was like really an interesting response, as you're saying, you know, this like medical narcissism and this medical gaslighting. It's like, I have irregular periods as an 11-year-old. Okay, well, it makes sense. The system is just getting jump started. Like, I haven't had a proper rite of passage connected to my menstrual cycle. I haven't had the proper emotional, psychological infrastructure like laid in to help me understand the importance of the cycle. And so, you know, of course, I was, you know, just put on medication, right? My mom felt like she was doing the right thing by doing that. And so it actually led me down a really nasty road of bacterial vaginosis, dealing with chronic yeast infections, all kinds of issues that I just thought were like just innate in the female body, you know, that this was just a normal thing to deal with these imbalances because that's how the medical community deals with illness. It's like, yeah, it's totally normal for you to, you know, be fluctuating between bacterial vaginosis and pH problems all the time, and you know, never really asking like, what are hormones playing in this? And so when I started finding the mushroom and started getting into like earth medicines and psychedelics, I found myself in an ayahuasca ceremony. And so in that ayahuasca ceremony, I was in like the care of some pretty earthy women who decided to, after the first night, sit in a circle and educate around natural birth control and conscious contraception and these topics that I had like really never considered or heard about because my fear was ultimately like becoming pregnant unplanned, right? And I felt that birth control, or what had been educated to me, was that birth control was the only way to ensure that you do not become pregnant. And so after this conversation, this sit around, you know, I had that Nexplanon in my arm, which I still have like a scar of, and I felt like coming off the mountain that my integration of that medicine experience were to be to come off of hormonal birth control forever and embark on the journey of learning my womb and to come into relationship with my rhythmic cycles. And so when I had the doctor remove the Nexplanon, I told her, because she asked me like, well, what birth control do you want to try now? Because I'd fucking tried them all and they're all terrible matches for me. And I said, I want to get off hormonal birth control because I want to learn the cycles of my moon and learn the mystery of my womb and learn like how I can function with my womb. And she just had no words for me. There's no words to respond to that as a medical professional because that's just not what they're trained in helping people understand. So yeah, I just walked out the office and then I was like, holy fuck, what have I done? Like, I'm sexually active. I don't know anything about my menstrual cycle and I don't know what my backup plans are. And so I learned what those were. Like I learned through searching what a backup plan was. I learned about yoni steaming on my own. I like started deeply researching, you know, family planning, natural family planning, cycle rhythm tracking, all those things I do now today. And in that wandering, found my teacher. I found a teacher, Starlily Sister Nova Birch, and she took me under her tutelage, and she's still my teacher to this day. And has initiated me into yoni steaming tradition. And I'm really grateful that I was able to find someone who would invest their wisdom into me so that I could grow. And honestly, what she says is like, yoni steaming in the womb healing is not just about sitting on a pot of herbs. Like this is a liberation movement. This is about helping wombs unlock to their potential, like what they were born to be, what they were born to become, whatever that looks like for you. And so I hope to do the same through education as liberation, helping people understand that, pharmaceuticals are not the only way to heal, and that there's a lot of ancestral practices that people have been disconnected from, that if they were to come back home to, could find balance and remedy with their body the way that I did. So that's how I got into yoni steaming. And I'm really grateful that my teacher, Sister Nova, came into my life, because I had been preparing some herbal blends for myself and friends. My mom's an herbalist too. My mom has always practiced Italian folk medicine like her whole life and my whole life. And that's where I get a lot of my education from, is from her. And so I had a knowledge of how to prepare herbs. And so, I started drawing this like figure on all of my packages and just like little notes to people. And that was the logo for my teacher's company. So I thought that was really cool that, we've been actually like calling out to each other psychically for a long time, until we were able to finally meet in this lifetime. So yeah, what an honor it is to be able to serve the womb in this time, because there is so much destruction around the womb. The environment we're living in is rather toxic. And so that's coming and showing up in a lot of imbalances of the womb, and leading to the ailments that we're seeing systemically, like mass hysterectomy, mass cesarean section, mass fibroids, uterine fibroids, and mass sterilization. So it's important for us to talk about these things. And there is a connection actually between the thyroid and thyroid issues and the functions and the health of the womb. And my mom had Hashimoto's and had hypothyroidism, and they eventually gave her hysterectomy because it affected her moon cycle so much that she really felt burdened by it. So I'm glad that you're centering also womb wellness in the thyroid care conversation, because I feel like it is an important aspect and element too. People should know
Yeah,
that hysterectomy is not the only
absolutely.
answer.
Unfortunately, I do meet a lot of women that they have a lot of missing body parts. And yeah, it makes me
Mm-hmm.
sad. And so I try to support as much as I can with
Yeah.
supplementation and herbs. But I love what you said about science books. You're like, everyone loves that part of the science book. We, it is, it
It's
really
the coolest
is.
part.
We all flip to that section, no matter like, even if we're in like high school health class. But yeah, I resonated so much with that. I absolutely did not know my cycle at all, like at all. My mom never taught me
Mm-hmm.
anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're taught just very basic information in school, and then we forget the majority of it. One second, wild heart. My mom has gone through this connection of fibroids and thyroid issues too. It's so important to talk about. Yeah, it is. It's affecting.
Mm-hmm.
I, if I could show a stat in my brain, like I bet the stat would be like 1 in 5 women. It's so low. Like there's so many women being affected by this. But yeah, I, you said so many things. I'm trying to like rewind. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, the
yeah.
people already
I
like
just
picked it up, so you
well, I
can review it
resonated with
later.
so much. I wanted to like make sure I could like hit on it. Yeah, I absolutely felt
Mhm.
completely disconnected from my cycle. And like you said, I became sexually active. And in San Diego, it was kind of like this known thing of that we could go to Planned Parenthood and get whatever we wanted. And we could be as sexually
Right.
crazy as we wanted because Planned Parenthood had our back. And if we wanted to get birth
Mm.
control, if we wanted to get an abortion, we could do everything without our parents' consent. And if they wanted parents' consent, we could put our friend's phone
Mm-hmm.
number down and our friend could pretend to be our parent and we could get away with everything. And so
Mm.
it was just a very, um, there wasn't a lot of awareness around your period or cycle or anything. You just suppressed it with birth control so you wouldn't get pregnant. And that was it. You could just have fun. And as
Right.
I was sick with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, I was on all kinds of birth control. And one of the things, like I didn't think about it because like you, I didn't want unplanned. I was scared. Well,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, I was in a conversation. I mean, I was in a marriage with a man that I was scared to continue to have kids with because he was so abusive. So I was trying to protect myself through birth control.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really
Yeah.
care what the side effects were because it was protection, right? And so when I finally
Mm-hmm.
was able to break
Mm-hmm.
free and divorce him, that's when I started looking at all dimensions of my wellness. And I started really analyzing birth control. Like, what is this for? Like, do I need this? Is it
Mm-hmm.
helping? Is it serving my body? Right. And so it was so nice to be able to ask these questions. And as I researched it, it was like, oh my God, huge red flags. Like, get away, stay away from birth control. And for me, this is my opinion. I'm not saying this to anyone else, but and then the more I've studied minerals and nutrients, I've learned that it's really high copper, and a lot of women are struggling with copper imbalances because of birth control, and they don't know it. And then this goes into a lot of the anxiety, the panic attacks, the mood disorders, the bipolar, and all of the neurological and like
Mm-hmm.
personal problems, that land us on
Mm-hmm.
more pharmaceuticals. So it's this vicious cycle. So I chose, like you, to go off
Mm-hmm.
my birth control, and I was terrified because I actually, this was years after I left my ex, and I was in a sexually active relationship. And again, I was like, I don't want to get pregnant. What do I do? And so there is no knowledge, really. You kind of feel like you are forced to turn to pharmaceuticals to protect yourself, whether it's Plan B, morning
Mm-hmm.
after pill, or something that's just causes so many nutrient deficiencies. They're high heavy metals, and they destroy your cycle, at least temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found this
Right.
app called Natural Cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of like, I felt like I jumped off the cliff, like, oh my gosh, this is scary, but I'm going to do it because I know it's what's best for my body. And I started tracking my cycle. And one of the big aha moments that I had was, holy shit, a lot of my symptoms that I thought were from my thyroid were actually my cycle, like just my normal rhythm that I had never knew even existed because I suppressed it for so long. So like
Mm-hmm.
these couple of days, I was actually really tired just because I was going to ovulate, or I am ovulating, or I'm actually really bloated these couple of days because I'm going to start my period. And instead of always just blaming all of my symptoms on my thyroid, like we're taught to do, it was so enlightening of like, holy shit, this is actually just my natural rhythm. And I can step back and give myself space and grace for these moments because this is what my body does. And it was so liberating. I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea, you know? And so I try to teach
Yeah.
this to my clients, but we are also very much in fear of having a child or
Mm-hmm.
unwanted pregnancy. Um, so yeah, totally get it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's a really, yeah, amazing connection that you're making with mineral imbalance, mental health issues, or perceived mental health issues being nutritionally based, and this vicious cycle that you're talking about of like more interventions kind of beget more interventions, kind of like the domino effect of interventions that we also see like in the birth scene, like one intervention causing like another stream of issues instead of just like, pulling everything back and really looking at the body as like not symptomatic, as not pathologizing the rhythm and the breath of the body. And I also feel the same way about when I'm talking to people about what's going on in their experience. I'm like, well, what is this symptom teaching you? Like, what imbalance is this pointing to? And like having really good inquiry, body inquiry, asking questions as opposed to just like trying to suppress, as you're saying, the language of the body. I think that is the most beautiful thing that we can learn from, is the body is signaling to us so many things. And I think what's unfortunate is like organizations like Planned Parenthood do not really teach body literacy, do not really have the emphasis on your own understanding and awareness of the cues and the signs and signals of the body. So, you know, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
say like
Yeah.
fuck Planned Parenthood. Like I think that they absolutely serve a need in the community. However, they've completely like overstepped what their fucking need and value is. And they've absolutely, as an organization, first of all, come from very nefarious origins, like Margaret Sanger, who's a known eugenicist and experimented on Puerto Rican women and has pushed for mass sterilization of the Black and Brown community as part of this like way of keeping the population, the way that they wanted it to be. They've also made it a really important point to kind of like weed out community-based wound care efforts, because there have been a number of different like collaboratives, co-ops that have come together to try to also support folks in these ways with abortion access and misoprostol and pap smears and all the other things that they offer at Planned Parenthood that's not abortion. And they have fought these organizations from expanding on non-competition clauses legally. And so like they're doing a good job of and making sure that they're monopolizing the womb care distribution. And they are a vehicle for big pharma. Like that's how they make a tremendous amount of their money, is by being another vendor basically for pharmaceutical products. And so, I think it's by design, and it's with no surprise at all that, and it's unfortunate that they seem to be a lot of the times the only option for people, especially in low-income communities. And so I think it's really important that, to emphasize like education as liberation. I feel like when people know their body, they don't have to hand off the power as much, and they can absolutely insource a lot of their healing, and not just insource to themselves, but like insourcing to the web of traditional people that like have been working with wombs, parteras, womb like root workers, and all these people that have been largely written off by the medical establishment as being just like witch doctors and not valuable, when they were the ones birthing every child up until the 18th century. So thank you for holding space for this conversation. Got a lot of hearts for this one, because it's the fucking truth. That's like why I say Western medicine is the alternative, because this has been the cadence of human life since the dawn of time. And now, like in just the last 300 years, we're saying all these people are not valuable and should be completely written off, for people that actually have no understanding of what the cycle is and the magic and the mystery and what it really takes in order to be well in this world. So yeah, thank you for holding space for this conversation, because I really like to take an intersectional lens of what the womb care issues are, and a lot of it you can't forget the history. Like this is all traceable, and so yeah, none of this wisdom is ahistoric. It all exists within a historical landscape. And as a white woman, right, as a European woman who has been like so overwhelmingly like over medicated, and myself as like a brown woman and coming from like a middle class or upper lower class like neighborhood and family, being under medicated, being underserved. And it's cool that we can come together and say this system has actually caused harm to us both, and in different ways. And so
Ooh,
I
chills.
don't see like
You're giving me chills on that one.
you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
we've been fucking harmed, dude, period. And in so many, and in different ways. And but that brings us together. It's like, let me tell you how we've been harmed, and you tell me how this shit has fucked you up, and let's dismantle it, because it's not serving anyone in the way that it was. I mean, it's functioning the way it was designed to, and that's not to be of service to the womb. So
Yeah,
yeah.
100%.
Any more
I love it.
questions?
You're welcome. I'm glad. I feel like we could talk on so much, like a lot of just areas, because this goes so far and wide.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I do have one more
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
But I did want to point out that a part of my story is when I started tracking my cycle and actually learning that I had a cycle. Like, I'm serious. Like some girls don't even
Mm-hmm.
know what ovulation is. Like they think it's just the menstrual cycle
Yeah.
that you just bleed and that's it. And I was almost
Right.
that illiterate. It was, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it absolutely
Mm.
was crazy. And I didn't read this. I actually started observing it like on my night walks, that like when I would be ovulating, there would be a new moon. When I'd be menstruating, there'd be a full moon. And I've noticed this correlation with the moon. So just from observations on my night walks, I was like, whoa, what is this? So then I actually started reading about the moon cycle and and our menstruation. And I think it is the design of that our bodies actually do circle around with the moon is probably one of the neatest things to me. I think it's just so fucking beautiful. And and so and one thing I wanted to say to everyone else, that something I literally didn't even know existed, is there is, I forget the name of this author, but there's a book called In the Flow that I started reading. And when you track your cycle, like what I've learned to do with my cycle tracker app, and it has taken away all fear, by the way, because the app itself is so detailed for me, and it can pinpoint the exact days I'm going to ovulate, the days I'm on my menstruation. I can literally plan my life around my cycle, and I can plan whether I want to have meetings. I can plan when I want to, be intimate. I can plan. It's like, it's so cool when you actually take a step back and you're like, this actually does rule my life, and I need to honor this. And you're like, okay, so I'm not going to have like some big, Zoom meeting on day 2 of my period, and this is the week I'm going to have my period. So I just wanted to point that out for everyone listening, because it was another like very liberating moment for me when I actually recognized that my period is a big part of everything I do every day. And that's special, and I need to appreciate that. So my last question for you
Thank you.
are what are ancestral codes?
What are ancestral codes?
Okay.
DNA, period. DNA. That's like what's left over, right? That's what's left over. That is tracking the epigenetic like imprints of experiences. This is like what is in our blood. This is what is created when the seed is created in our grandmother's womb that gives rise to us. It's important to just situate ourselves historically and situate ourselves ancestrally. And in a lot of traditional African religions, like we believe the ancestors are like the closest beings to us. Like some people in Christianity, they pray to God. Some people in Islam, they, in Islamic traditions, they pray to Allah, right? And there's like this kind of like calling out to like the highest force, which I'm fucking with too. Like, I think it's important for us to like praise to the most high, and like to bring in like and anchor in these frequencies that of creator. But at the end of the day, creator is very busy. Okay, like there's kind of this like understanding in these cosmologies, right, that we all exist within creation. And yet, like, who's going to understand our human issues, right? Like, who's going to understand what's going on in our family more than our own ancestors, right? Like, we are our own ancestors. I've had mushroom experiences with people, one most recently, where she discovered that she was her own grandmother who'd been like, and she's a great great grandmother, right? And she's like, oh my God, like, I remembering who I am, and I planted the seed that I would come back. Like, and when we give reverence and honor to our ancestors, is like, we are tapping into like our spiritual locale. That's so important. It's so important to know like where we come from, what lands we're from, what foods they were eating, because that's going to cue to us and tell us like how we need to live our life. Like there's a word called Sankofa, and Sankofa, it means to look back, because if you don't know where you're from, you cannot know where you are going. And so when I say ancestor codes, it's like important to be like relevant to like who the fuck we are and like where we come from and like what they did, because a lot of people have assimilated like American culture, capitalist culture, this whatever society, norms, that, but this is like a computer program that we are trying to take into our hardware, and yet we are fucking constructed for something way different. We're constructed for cosmologies that, like you said, help us to remember to honor our earthly origins and our cosmic origins. Like we are connected to the moon, like our moon is pulling on the tide. Like we are earthbound, we are solar, and we're the ancestors. Okay, like even the Mayan civilization has in their origin stories that they are descendants of like the stars, right? We have Native American origin stories that honor Sky Woman as having come from the stars to be on Earth and to learn what it's like to live on Earth. Like, these origin stories give us the entire framework for the way that we continue to live our lives here on Earth. And I feel like these ancestor codes are those memories and that knowledge base left over for us to pick up and continue walking with. But many people don't have connections to their ancestors. Many people have been detribalized, disenfranchised. You know, we've lost our native names. Like, a lot of the daughters and brothers of the African diaspora, you know, they lost their names, they lost their culture, their language. And that's for good reason, because colonizers know that when you disconnect people from their ancestors, they lose their power. They lose their ability to have any feet, any ground to stand on. So when I say ancestor codes, it's just like a way of coming back home. It's like a way of remembering who we are, where we're going, and how we want to walk through the world. So that's been so liberating a process for me, to just understand where I'm coming from, what people I'm coming from, and recognizing that, like, my it's already been set up for me. Like, I already got blueprints for certain things. Like, I have a blueprint for being an artist. Like, I have these particular, like, affinities towards stuff because of who my family is and where we come from and what lands we come from. I have favorite foods, and they just so happen to be the foods that are from, like, where we're from. So I just love to position people in this, like, understanding that you are part of a generational sphere, you know, and that it's so valuable to look in. And someone just asked, and I think this actually will be a really nice close, but, you know, what's everyone's homework? I'm an educator. I love to leave people with some shit to fucking do, like, in the tangent realm. So a tangible realm. So how do we get in connection with our ancestor and in touch with our ancestors? So what I learned and what I was always taught is that it's important for you to have a meeting place for your ancestors, right? Like, we could be finding our ancestors in the trees, and we can be traveling all kind of ways, and that's all very fine and good. And also remember that, like, you're also interacting and interfacing with the ancestors of the land that you're standing on. So also remembering, like, whose ancestors' bones make up the soil that your house is built on. Be thinking about those things. Be thinking of the ancestors in the soil making up the minerals and the calcium and the phosphorus and the iron and the potassium that's, like, in the soil are the bones of human beings. So, like, thinking about that first of all, and situating yourself with that kind of consciousness. And then when you decide, I want to build a relationship with my ancestors, having a place for them to come to, and that usually looks like an altar. And having an altar in your home, low to the ground, bringing as many pictures and pieces of those things that remind you of them. If you don't have pictures of them, write their names, whatever you can, to focus your concentration in the third dimension, that this is a place for them to come and exist. And we offer food, we offer water, all kinds of things. Their favorite foods, making ofrendas is something we do every year for Dia de Muerto. It's like a part of our life way. You know, it's not trendy to be into your ancestors. It's like an absolute,
Yeah.
you have to remember them. So making an altar is important. And also, if people don't feel like they're ready to do that, then sometimes we just make a plate of food and leave it at an empty seat at the table and just say, this is from my ancestors. If they want to come and eat, they're welcome to be here in my family. So it's important. This is tangible medicine. This is tangible magic. Like, it's important to make space in the third dimension for them to know that they're being welcomed and invited. And that's a really wonderful first step
That
for
sounds so
people.
fun. I actually just started learning about an ancestral altar a few weeks ago. I started doing some ancestral healing with a Celtic shaman out of Maryland. Um, Beautiful, beautiful experience. And she taught me about my ancestral altar. And she was teaching me about 6 generations of my grandmothers. And it was very, like you said, they are with us and we are them and we are one. And we are
Mm-hmm.
never alone. I've learned that for sure. And so
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about putting a plate on the table. That's so cute. And you're like, here you go. You guys are welcome to
Mm-hmm.
join.
It
Yeah,
is.
because
Yeah,
I know for
please.
sure that my
Yeah.
grandma Hope is always with me. And I talk to her and I say hi to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And anytime we do ceremony, anytime we do this healing work, if you're going to yoni steam or a fucking yoga session or, like, whatever it is, a sound healing, whatever it is, you have the opportunity. Like you said, we are one, like we are related. So it's possible to call them in and just say, I'd also like to share this healing with my grandmother who's not here with us, but she's going to heal with me. I'd like to invite her into this practice. Like, it is possible when you sit with mushrooms that they're also experiencing, the ripples of your experience. And so, always be like thinking about them in as an ally. They are also our allies, just like we were talking about being in relationship in the very beginning. It's important to remember how to be a good friend, how to be a good ancestor to the future, and how to be a good, descendant of people. They want to
Yeah.
be remembered. We want to be remembered too. So, it's important to remember them, to call them in when it's time to, and just know that, the healing work that we're doing here on the third dimension is healing us forwards and backwards and in every dimension possible. So when we are doing work, we don't heal in a vacuum. We heal with them, and often our ancestors are guiding us to these practices because they also need to, be feeling the appreciation of these healing ways. So yeah, thank you for welcoming the conversation of the ancestors, because I feel like it's absolutely intrinsic to the womb healing work in particular, because the womb is an ancestral
Yes, you're
realm.
right. And I could actually, I would love to do another one and just talk about that, because so much of everything that I've learned as I've uncovered all of my shadows, and I've been doing a lot of my own healing work the past year and a half, every single aspect of it has pointed me to my grandmothers. And I had no idea that was going to
Mm.
happen. So one of the ways that I also am learning about them, because I want to see what they look like. I want to know what their life was like. I want to know where they were born. So I have an app called Family Search, and it has our tree, and it's so beautiful, and there's so much information on it. So I open that up and I'll read through and I'll connect with them that way, and I'll be able to like find some pictures and build my altar with some pictures. So learning about that app was
Mhm.
really, really helpful for me as well to like get in touch. Yeah. But thank
Absolutely.
you again for
Yeah.
your time. Someone
Thank
said,
you.
please go live more often.
Mhm. I have another live actually this afternoon if you want to come and join me. And then I have a live on Wednesday
Nice.
too. So yeah, I'm live plenty.
Yes.
Just keep following
Awesome.
along.
Awesome. We'll definitely learn from you, either live or on the replay. But it was so nice to meet you. I can't wait to come back now and
Yeah.
do some mushrooms with you. That's going to be nice.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I'll hit you up on the back channel, and thank you for offering your platform to center this conversation. And I hope that the information is like pleasing to people, and if it's not pleasing, that I hope that it is not disturb. And we are just here to educate in the ways that I know how. So I hope that this reaches the right folks. And if anyone has specific questions around their own spaces, feel free to DM me. And if they're interested in this education, I did a 3-part like series with the Ancestor Project called Wombs of the Empire that really give a beautiful like demonstration of the knowledge that I do have within the womb space. So that's at the link in my bio. And yeah, if anyone wants to dive into like more detailed education, I'm super happy to share what
Wonderful.
I
Yeah,
know. So
I'm
yeah, thank
definitely
you
going to
so
check
much.
that out. Awesome. Thank you guys all for being here, and
Cool.
everyone have a great, blessed rest of your day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.